All right, it's 1 o'clock, so we will start the February 12th, 2025 current use advisory board meeting. Thank you very much all for being here. My name is Jill Remick. I'm the director of property valuation and review. We have a pretty even split of folks in the room and on Teams. And we have a very, very full agenda, and we also have a hard stop at 3, not only out of respect for all your time, but also because someone else wants the room and they reserved it. So I think maybe we'll just do a real quick round of introductions because we've got a few new faces. And maybe we'll start in the room and then I'll call on folks on Teams. So Keith, do you mind? We'll kind of go.
Sure. Hi all, my name is Keith Thompson. I'm the private land program manager with Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation here on behalf of Commissioner Fitzko. For the record, I do have land enrolled in the current use program.
Long space here, I guess.
Hi all, I'm Catherine Servideo. I'm the Forest Economy Program Manager with Forest Parks and Recreation.
I'm Katie Emerson. I'm a current use specialist with the Department of Taxes.
I'm Will Baker. I'm the Chief Legal Counsel for the Department of Taxes, and I think this is my first current use advisory board meeting.
Oh, that's exciting.
You want me to go?
Yes, please.
I'm Jeanette Cole, and I'm the president of the Vermont Forest Council, and I'm here to just make a little public comment.
Thank you.
I'm Kate Strauss. I'm Kate Batchley. Excuse me. I got married in November. And I'm the assistant director of property valuation review.
My name is Michael Ramsey. I'm the current use section chief. I've been with the department for about 6 months now, and also my first current use advisory board meeting. I'm excited to be here.
Harold Horrigan, just a landowner from Fairfield, Vermont.
Ryan Patch, Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Market. I'm a policy manager there with agricultural, climate change, and land use topic areas.
I'm Walter Hastings, a lister for the town of Royalton, and a lister for over 30 years.
I'm Josh Lagerquist. I'm a certified general appraiser with Farm Credit East.
I'm Brian. I'm again, sorry.
Thanks. All right, so now we'll go online. I'm just going to go in order of my squares here. Cam, you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Camden Bean, property valuation and review, and I'm taking the minutes today.
Thank you, Cam. And Steve.
Steve Hanfield. I'm a consulting forester based out of Pulteney.
Thank you. Alan.
Morning, everyone. My name is Alan Calfee. I'm a licensed professional forester and landowner in Rupert, Vermont. Member of the board, and I also have land enrolled in the current use program.
Thank you. Suzanne.
Hi there, Suzanne Monty. I'm the attorney for PBR.
Suzanne. Michael.
Hi, Mike Hogan. I'm chair of the Cabot Select Board.
Thanks, Mike. Ken.
Ken Brown, I'm a current use program specialist covering towns Middlesex through Shoreham.
Thank you. Nick.
Hi, I'm Nick Zimny-Shea. I'm the current use specialist for Shrewsbury through Worcester.
Yeah. Kiri. All right, Carrie is one of the members of the current use staff as well. Ted, why don't you go ahead?
Ted Foster, retired dairy farmer from Middlebury, and we have land enrolled in current use as well as forestry enrolled in current use. And I'm also a lister in the town of New Haven.
Great, thank you. And I've got Ryan, you're logged in, Keith, you're logged in. Elizabeth.
Elizabeth Hunt, formerly with the current use program, officially retired as of the end of September, and I am currently working as a temp for property valuation and review as a senior, what am I, a senior tax analyst, I think? Some combination of those words.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Gail.
This is Gail Fowler. I'm the town clerk in Tinmouth. I'm the local government member. I'm also a lister since 1977, but I do not have any land enrolled.
Okay, thank you. And Carrie?
Carrie Potter, current use specialist covering towns Addison through Derby.
Awesome. Thanks, Carrie. All right, I think we got everybody. All right. So like I said, I am recording the meeting so that we can have a transcript. And thank you also again to Cam for taking on helping with the meeting minutes. Really appreciate that. So yeah, we have a pretty full agenda. We are going to, this is our big meeting where we have a lot to cover. We'll just see if I can share. Well, maybe I'll say it out loud. I think most of you have the agenda in front of you. All right, so for the agenda, we just did welcome and introductions. We do have a point on our agenda every day for public comment. We do have public comment today. We also need to review and approve our meeting minutes from the last time we got together, which was actually September. We do have a request for rulemaking that Will is going to walk us through the request and the actions we as the board can take. We'll do some legislative updates from each of the agencies: Department of Taxes, Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation, Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. And then Agriculture and Forestry will both be walking through their calculations and use values for the 2025 tax year. And then if we have time, we'll provide an update on the current use rules review. There's been a subcommittee of the board that's been reviewing those rules for quite a while, bringing them in line with current statute and reflecting any other like statutory, or rather statutory changes or Supreme Court decisions or other important decisions. Not to make a lot of policy changes, but just to get the rules up and accurate, because they have not been updated since the current use program was in effect in the 80s. So it's probably going to need to be a separate meeting of the board to walk through those, but we'll at least give you an update on that. I did send out a PDF, thanks to Suzanne, a clean version, so you can sort of read it as it's proposed, but then also it's really important to have a track changes version to show what was there before and what has been changed. So we'll see how far we get through that, and then we'll hopefully adjourn. And like I said, we do have a hard stop at 3. So I think at this point we will ask Jeanette, do you mind giving your public comment to the board?
So thank you first for having us, and Jill for responding to us at such a late notice. We just learned about this meeting and this advisory board, and so we felt it was important to get in front of you and just give a little bit of information about us, and then also to get faces with names here. So I'm Jeanette Cole, and I'm the president of the Vermont Forest Council. We do have an equine industry committee that works with the Farm Bureau for all legislation. And we are currently working with legislators on the inequities for equine businesses under current use doctrine. So we also think that we are very well dovetailed to this advisory board, because our goals are your goals. Our equine businesses are aligned with land management, with thriving businesses in Vermont to bring tourism and tax dollars into the state, and to oversee the lands appropriately. Our mission in Vermont Forest Council is threefold. We do legislation, again, with the Farm Bureau. We do education, and then we work a lot on trails and trail access for equestrians. As I said, we're working on with legislators on inconsistency in the Vermont statutes for equine businesses that restrict our eligibility specifically for current use. And that we're asking here to be included in your work, so that we as stakeholders in driving tourism and maintaining open spaces and promoting proper land management, that our equine businesses and farmers have voices that are heard. Jill has a meeting with our equine committee chair, Heidi Krantz, next week, I believe. And Heidi is very well versed in this. I'm sort of a spokesperson for that group, but Heidi's been intimately involved with the legislators right now, and she and Jill will be getting together on that. And that's pretty much, I wanted to just introduce ourselves and make sure that you knew who we were, and that you know that we're working to get equity under current use. And also just to thank you very much for giving me a few minutes to say those words. And I only had so much silver for my meter, so I got 15 minutes. So I'm not going to hang around today, but I really do hope that when you get with ID, that could be able to kind of make a good path together. So thank you.
Thank you. And just so folks know, public comment is designed for the board to hear from members of the public. It's not meant to like sort of engage in a conversation, other than obviously any conversation can happen after that. And we also did get written public comments submitted that I sent around just a couple hours ago.
So thank you for your work. This is not an easy topic, I don't think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we don't often get public comment at the board meetings, but we're trying to be better about posting our information, as this is a public board with statutory duties on our website. And I think as soon as that got posted or got out, I think that's never happening. That's a huge part of the board's role, is to hear from constituents and folks interested in the program. All right, now I think real quick, hopefully, we will review and approve the meeting minutes so that we can get to Will and let Will get on with his day.
Jill,
Yeah, go ahead.
what was the written comments that were sent?
Oh, sorry. They were from a woman, I think her name is Mindy Hinsdale. So she's also representing the Vermont Arts Council. It's a copy of her testimony that she gave to House Agriculture last week about basically asking the legislature to allow equine businesses in the current use program. So right now, like their farm buildings aren't eligible, and if they're under 55 acres, they're not eligible. And it comes up every few years. So there's a fair amount of background and research on that. But if you didn't get that,
I probably did. But
well, I should make sure I have your email, because
like Kate this morning.
yeah, it was just maybe late morning. So yeah, I just got it.
On my way here.
Okay. If you don't, please do let me know, because I want to make sure we have all your contact information.
Yeah,
correct.
thank you.
Great. So now we'll move on to reviewing and approving the minutes. Did anyone have a chance to look at them? And if so, I know Gail's our eagle eye. Did anyone have any edits or corrections to make to the meeting minutes?
This is Alan. I would move that we accept the minutes as written.
This is Gail. I second it. I just have a question as to, it says, see the link for the full recording. How long do you keep your recordings?
For the recording of the board meeting?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose that's a question I'll ask you all. Right now, obviously, it's only a few months old, so I think at least a year. But that's a good point. Should we?
Public record retentions policy, does that apply to recordings of meetings? Do you guys have a policy on how long you keep it? That's what we've had to go through, is got a set timetable for when you keep stuff.
Okay. So at least 3 years, probably. I mean, if we're doing it as a courtesy, I don't think we're required to post the recording in the first place. But since we have, then yeah, I think at least 3 years might be longer. Because I think, I'm not sure that you folks are held to the same, the new requirements for the open meeting law. I mean, we're streaming live and providing that. But I'll look into that. That's a good question.
Thank you.
Alyssa? Yeah, good question.
We've historically kept all of the recordings when they were done on tape or CD, and they're stored in our vault. And I know Keith found it very useful to go listen to the tapes from the late 80s, early 90s when we were trying to sort. He felt like he was in junior high again, I'm sure. But yeah. We have historically kept all of the recordings forever for those, so that we've got that information, because sometimes the meeting minutes are not thorough enough to understand what happened. So if you are looking for the historical ones, they're in the vault.
Great, thank you.
And Catherine's husband restores Walkmans, so you
Nice.
will have a way to listen. Yeah, I listen to the deep cuts.
I went to a phone-free meeting as a board member, and one of the kids, to protest the phone-free policy, brought a box of cassette tapes in his Walkman around. He was like, "You can't tell me I can't listen to my music." Props to them. Yeah.
Fight the power.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion on the meeting minutes? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right, so we've approved our meeting minutes. We'll get those finalized and posted. Thank you. All right, And then Will Baker is our general counsel. He's here to walk us through our request and our responsibility regarding rulemaking. So I'll pass it to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. I think I can be very quick here. The tax commissioner received a request for rulemaking, but the current use advisory board is the entity responsible for the current use rules. So that's why I'm here. The Administrative Procedures Act statute, which is what enables entities like the advisory board to enact rules, also provides the public an opportunity to request of the agency to undertake rulemaking. And so we received a request for rulemaking of the current use rules January 28th. It's not very specific. It says it's your responsibility to reflect actual procedures, forms, and duties, implementing in the field, or delete the rule if you are not following it. So I think that the point here is that the current use rule is several years old, and in places it may be no longer relevant either to statute or to practice of PVR and FPR. So we received this request for rulemaking, and the statute requires that the advisory board either say no or undertake rulemaking with the Secretary of State within 30 days. So I know later in this meeting today, you're gonna review some updates to the rule. So I know that you're working on updates to the rule, but you probably won't be filing with the Secretary of State by March 1st, which would be the deadline under the statute. So you might consider authorizing Jill or me to write back to the individual and say, we are, undertaking edits to the current use rules, but because we won't be filing within 30 days of your request, technically the answer is no, we are not undertaking rulemaking as your request.
And at the point we submit to the Secretary of State, does it have to be our final draft of the rules?
It doesn't have to be your final draft, but it does kick off a lengthy process. You file a draft rule, you gather all kinds of input from all stakeholders and individuals, and there's several filings with a executive branch committee, with the Secretary of State, and then with a legislative rulemaking committee, and then there's a final rule. So the answer is no. You can edit the rule after you've started, but it does kick off a clock, and there's advertising in the newspapers and et cetera. So you really want to be ready with a good final draft when you make that first filing.
Thank you. Any other questions? Do we need a motion to?
So what's our goal for a timeline? I mean, and involved in this part of it, I did peruse through it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to get it done in 2025.
Yes.
It's out of date, and it is definitely like impeding. And we're getting decisions, hearing officer decisions. We're having interactions with landowners. It's really out of compliance right now. So I'd love to get it through in 2025, but I don't think March 1, right? Because we all as a board need to really review. There's been a subcommittee that's come up with this draft with Suzanne. So, it's good enough. We wanted to bring it to you guys, but we as a board kind of need to go through it. And then at some point this board would vote, yeah, this is what we want to put forth for the public to do. I think this year would be reasonable.
I defer to council, but our experience in agriculture is, I think it would be a fine goal to file it in 25, but it tends to take 9 months to a year to get through the process. So
yeah.
The goal of filing it in 25 would be, I think, reasonable. I think it'd be really tough to finish it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fundamentally. Go ahead.
I had a question on, we're dealing with the Horse Council. Do we have the right to change the rules, or is that legislature that has to do that?
The legislature would have to change the definition of farming, and then we would have to update our rules to reflect that. But we can't make that change in our rules because we can only go as far as the statute allows. Yeah, and I did communicate that to them. That would need to be a statutory change.
And to be clear, the rulemaking request is distinct
Totally
from
different.
the
Yeah, sorry.
equine community request.
Yeah, the rulemaking request came from another current participant, not anything to do with that request, right?
Just a question on the text here. I mean, fundamentally, program's gonna stay basically the same, just cleaning up some of the
For the
language
rules,
that's 40
the
years
draft in
old.
front of you guys, that's the plan, is that the draft in front of you all is supposed to be the current best practice statute as of right now. Yeah. I'm not trying to add new things, not removing things, but bringing it up to date.
I'd suggest that we decline to take up the rule within 30 days because to achieve the goals that rulemaking is intended to achieve is going to require more time than 30 days would allow.
But meanwhile, we are working on them in earnest and we'll
Yes.
continue to do so. Yeah, okay. Did you need a motion from us? Okay. So do I have a motion to decline to initiate rulemaking under 3 V.S.A. 806?
Also move.
A second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right,
Would you like me to communicate that back to the landowner?
is that all right?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, we are working on them, but yeah, we can't do the 30 days yet. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Phil.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, next up is a little informal, but I wanted to make sure we always try to do this, especially being February, beginning of the legislative session. So I'll start and then I'll look to Keith and Catherine from FPR and Ryan from Agriculture to talk about any legislative updates. So we have not put forth any, we, the tax department, have not put forth anything significant that would impact this group. So far I've been asked to come in and testify on current use broadly. And then on Friday, they actually did ask me to come in and talk about the current use advisory board. You may have gotten a request from them or not, I'm not sure. Because I sent them all your email at their request to talk through what the current use advisory board's responsibility is and how it's made up and that sort of thing. And then I did listen to the testimony last week about the equine. They're requesting that the definition of farmer and the definition of farm building be expanded to include equine. Right now, my understanding is, the definition of farming and of animal product is if you're breeding horses or if you're pasturing over 25 acres, that's one thing. But for like horseback riding, trail riding, leasing, boarding, things like that, that's not considered like farm income for the purposes of the right use. So that would require a statutory change. The other thing I definitely wanted to bring to this group's attention, we've had to go in a little bit about land use change tax again. We continue to hope that we can make it a bit more predictable and fair and equitable in how the portion of the parcel is calculated. There is a bill, it's H134, that Representative Kimball, and it looks like he has several co-sponsors, have put forth that has two sections to it that can sort of happen independent of each other. But section 1 is to change the land use change tax calculation back to the 2015 methodology or some version of that it's prorated rather than a standalone parcel valuation. And then the second component of the bill is an exemption from land use change tax in specific instances if that land is being withdrawn to develop for affordable housing. And there are very specific parameters to that and definitions for that. So we've been tracking that and working with him. The language that's actually on the bill that made it to H134 for discussion has that exemption expanding to any parcel within 3 miles of one of those designated downtowns or neighborhoods. And if you look at a map, I'll pull it up maybe when others are speaking, but that's throwing the gates wide open on current use. So that's not really, I don't see
basically 1.7 million of 2.5 million acres would benefit from this exemption.
Be exempted, yeah. Because the idea is they're trying to incentivize or at least remove the barrier if there are parcels that are being withdrawn specifically to develop affordable housing, specifically adjacent to those downtown districts. But then when you expand it to the 3-mile radius, that's a very different impact than it was. It was adjacent to and on a public road and not fragmenting the parcel and there were, so it's been, my understanding is that Representative Kimball, who's on Ways and Means, they're a little busy with education financing right now, but they have asked the House Agriculture Committee to take it up. Haven't seen it this week on their schedule, but I can see the topic.
I think affordable housing is one of the most overused terms I've ever heard. There's no such thing as affordable housing.
Right.
Today's
Right. Yeah, and in this case, it was, it would have to be sort of signed off on by ACCD, Agency of Commerce and Community Development, as like affordable housing capital A's under a different state statute. But yeah, and also, who knows what we could. I think I saw another hand.
I think that.
Swap with the two of them.
Did I forget any legislative?
I said after the pencil, if you want to.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine with
Who's
this.
Steve Canfield?
Thank you.
Oh, Steve. Yeah, I'm sorry, Steve.
Better when I'm out in the cold.
Yeah, I was just typing my question in the chat, but is the data readily available that shows the total amount of land use change taxes paid, on an annual basis, pre penalty change and post 2015?
Yes, yeah, we have that in our annual report. I'll pull up that table. It sort of shows the progress over time. It's sort of hard to draw conclusions from it, right? Because it changed, and land use change tax, the value and the volume of it is not necessarily consistent year over year, but I definitely do
For
have
sure.
that. I'll put that in the chat.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know if the 25-acre threshold is a real action.
Right, so that's true. There has been some discussion. There's no bill yet, but about whether 25 acres is still a reasonable number of acres to be considered the minimum for the parcel, for the creating a parcel less than 25 acres. Is that reasonable, knowing how, Vermont only has so many acres, things are getting broken, but maybe the needs of 25 acres versus something else different than that was said. But there's no bill at this point on that one. I think that's all the tax are in use. Oh, wait, sorry, Will, to put you on the spot. Did we put in our miscellaneous tax bill about the farm crop, including heads, like rental of like leasing to someone for pasturing their animals? We wanted to make that clear.
I think we did.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I'll try to find that and share that with you all as well. Okay, I think that's all the tax legislative updates. I'll keep thinking and I'll pull up those slides too. Can I hand it over to Keith and Catherine?
Yeah, I'll start off, and if you want to add anything.
Sure.
So related to Kimball's bill, we are concerned about the area that would be impacted by the exemption. We're generally supportive both of a more transparent, easily administered land use change tax, and to the extent that we can avoid conflicts between working lands priorities and housing priorities, we're totally supportive. And if there is a way to create exemptions in a way that doesn't threaten the working lands or in the integrity of the current use program, that I think that we'd be interested in discussing how that could be done. We do feel like the three miles is not the right balance for those goals. So that's where we're at on that one. There's another bill sponsored by Representative Higley. There was a Act 59 last year, is a 30 by 30, 50 by 50 bill that is focused on having 30% of Vermont conserved by 2030 and 50% conserved by 2050, focused on permanently conserved lands, particularly for the 30 by 30 goal with basically something comparable to permanently conserved for the 50 by 50 goal. This bill proposes to include current use enrollments in the evaluation and calculation of satisfaction of the 30 by 30 goal and eliminate the permanently conserved aspect of that of Act 59. And for our part, I think in some respects, this is an acknowledgement of the really important conservation value of current use and the feeling that the act didn't appropriately acknowledge or celebrate or support the current use program. Maybe that's a valid concern. At the same time, we feel like current use is incredibly successful precisely because it's not permanent conservation and it provides flexibility and affordability and values that permanent conservation doesn't provide. And there are things that use value doesn't provide and permanent conservation does. And to mix those is mixing apples and oranges. They are two incredibly useful land use tools. It's not a value judgment. They're different, and combining them or equating them makes it very hard for us in working lands to understand where the opportunities are and where the priorities might lie. We think that in the Act 59, there was a bill or an aspect of it that would discuss how to achieve the 50 by 50 and what's necessary. We feel that use value appraisal is foundational for supporting permanent conservation and ecological and working lands goals across the state, and use value has a really important part there. So I think that I don't have a full understanding of why it feels like a good idea to combine these two. But I think that just from a strategic approach and trying to achieve multiple goals, mixing them doesn't help. There are specific tools with specific values. I testified last Thursday to House Ag and Forestry on use value appraisal. There has been discussion about where the opportunities for improvement that could save some education funds. And I spoke to the importance of use value in supporting keeping forest land intact, supporting affordability, and less directly, but no less significantly, supporting the opportunity to manage by supporting landowners in managing their forest land, making forest products available, having truckers, having skilled operators. All of that stuff is a prerequisite to a landowner even being able to consider management. Furthermore, current use mandates planning. It helps landowners move from a conceptual idea to action. And you don't have a working landscape unless people are acting towards their goals. They need the opportunity to do it. They need to keep their land. Use value appraisal touches on all these prerequisites to stewardship of forest land. And so we can tweak the affordability piece and save some money. But if we do that, we tweak every other aspect of the program and it begins to lose its stability and integrity in the outcomes that it provides. And so I testified that we're looking to do more, not less. This would be a really difficult time to be quickly making changes to the program, and any changes, we always need to improve it, should be done really thoughtfully and carefully.
You talk about affordability, or you're talking about the context of the whole program?
I'm talking about ownership of forest land, of like being able to hold on to a parcel is, and so I'm not speaking to the affordability of the program. I did during the testimony speak a little bit about the different angles that people use, the way that people talk about the savings that landowners realize, or the cost to the state, or the assumption is that if it's a cost, it's money owed that's not paid. If it's savings, it's money that would have been spent but isn't. Another angle is it's equity, that it's equitable taxation, and that it's neither owed nor saved. It is just a reasonable rate for enrolled land. And any angle is appropriate. And I think many are legitimate, but we need to be careful about articulating the cost of the program as an entitlement that we're foregoing. It was a choice to solve a problem that we took on when we took a ad valorem taxation approach in the state.
I do think that was
looking
good.
at it.
All right, go ahead, Ted.
We're looking at an investment in keeping land open, not a tax savings. That's the way I like your last approach you had there. But instead of calling it tax savings, that's very negative effect on people that don't have a tax savings. So I really see it as an investment in keeping land open.
Yeah, and we did get, the House Agriculture Committee did say specifically that they've been asked to look at anything related to the ed fund, including current use. I think your analogy of like checking in the couch cushions for any ed fund is a fair one. I don't know that they'll find that in current use, but they have been asked to like take a deep dive into everything related, right? Universal School Meals is also in that committee, current use. So yeah.
Catherine, is there anything that you would add?
No. And I should have added in my update, I did submit that report, the Act 146 of 2022 report that I ran by you all last fall. It was part of the reserve forest land legislation asked us to come back with any suggestions for expanding use value categories. We all agreed we weren't interested in expanding them, but we were going to spend some time, and it sounds like there's some interest today in talking through, you know, the calculation, which is currently set in statute as well, but not expanding additional categories at this time. So I haven't been asked to come in. We sent it to all the committees that wanted it. It was pretty brief because it said we're not making recommendations, but we haven't been asked to come in on that one yet.
Catherine and I will be testifying tomorrow in House Ag and Forestry at 2:00. And I'm testifying in House Environment tomorrow on reserve forest land at 9 a.m. For what it's worth, I just ran some numbers. 31 properties have begun to enroll in reserve forest land. It is 5,400 acres approximately. So, which is 0.3% of the total enrollments forest land.
So this would be the first year, or this would be the second year that you're at it?
Second year.
Yeah.
We're about 1.5 years in.
Any other legislative updates? Yes.
No.
Ryan, do you have any legislative updates from Agriculture, Food and Markets?
Not more than's been discussed about bills and land use generally, agriculture, and the needs of agriculture, and trying to see it not as a monolith, but there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of different interests, and you know, hopefully that will be part of the policy analysis folks have. And some of the encouragement I shared to them in my testimony last week was, it's the don't kill the goose that lays a golden egg, right? Be considered and study what you're going to do before you change it, even if you think it's small, because this is a very, very important program. Even if there are issues right now, we don't want to break it. So yeah, there's a lot of other stuff affecting agriculture, as there is tax and forestry, but in this space, this is probably going to be the major focus of the discussions that the agency will be involved in.
Okay. All right, well, with that, maybe we'll stick with you. Do you want to walk through the agriculture use values?
Sure.
And while you're pulling that up, just as a reminder, that was one of the good things about the Act 146 report. It made me dig through session law from 2010 and find there had been a memo from between tax and lawmakers about how the use values were calculated. And so then that memo was referenced in a session law that is how it shall be calculated. And so I can resend the Act 146 report, which just repeats that text of how the use value is articulated, the methodology there, and then the forest use value and how that's articulated. So
session law, that's why it can't be found.
Yeah,
If you could share, that'd be great.
Yeah, okay.
Have that more readily able to be found.
And just quickly for the folks remote, we can no longer see you on the screen in here. We made it big so that everyone could see Ryan's presentation. So if you have something you want to say, you'll need to type up.
All right.
Should I begin?
I think you can, yeah.
All right. Here is the proposed well, we'll get to the figure in a minute. Probably should have started with the figure. So the general concept of calculating agricultural use value, as I understand it, or as we do it, is, we use the weighted rental value by the capitalization rate. The rental value method uses the census data around total annual cropland, total pasture land, and then the NAS census around rental rates for pasture and cropland. The capitalization rate is how much money you can make off of money, sum of discount rate, risk, and statewide effective tax rate. What I shared this morning was the output of the Excel spreadsheet, which is set up to do the calculation, as well as the longer form equation. So there's two ways to look at how the ag use value was calculated for, or drafted, proposed for 2025. 510 is the figure that we're at. 483, I believe, was the one last year, so it has increased. We use the USDA NAS Ag Census. 2022 is the most recent one. It is updated. So we have new acreages for Vermont for conducting this analysis. So the prior 4 years of 2020 through 2023 are going to use the 2017 data, which was used to do those calculations in the past. There's been a 72,000 acre decrease between the two censi. How do you pluralize that? I don't know. Which is about a 12% decrease. All right. So this is to take the formula and it's color coded. So orange is the orange box, green is the green box, purple is the purple box, yellow is the output. The weighted ag rental value calculation happens in step one. We take 2024 is this new year of census data. So you'll see the decrease between the pasture line. This is cropland up here. This is pasture land down here. We've had a slight rebalancing of nominal change of the distribution of those acres that are in cropland and those that are in pasture land. The rental rate did increase for pasture by $3.50 from the survey, though it has gone down by $1 for pasture land. And then we do a weighted average between those and end up with a 5-year average of 51.18. Step two is to look at the capitalization rate, where we get data from Forest Parks and Rec and the tax department. Thank you for the discount rate and statewide effective non-homestead property tax rate, and then a risk factor. You sum those all together, and this year it's 6.60, which is a little bit of an increase from last year's calculation. So this third step is to calculate the annual ag value calculation. So you take that 5-year weighted average, divide by the capitalization rate, and we get $776. We then need to input that with the 4 previous years. We use 2024's ag use value, so decreases from what that value was, but you take 405 through 43 and 776, and you average them all. Ag use value 510 is the proposed value using this method. Next slide is the equations written out, and then the long form input of those values here, which are found on the prior slide. So can do that calculation longhand or using Excel. This is just screen captures and sources for those values. This is the NASA Ag Statistics Service and Vermont survey rental data for cropland and pasture, and those values there 64 and 28. And then this is both 2022 and 2017 in one table. This is table 8 from the 22 ag census. And what we're looking at is harvested cropland, pasture land, where is that? Permanent pasture, and then woodland that is pastured. That's been the 3 components that make up that farmed consideration for the current use program, and those have been used for 10 years to do that acreage calculation. And then I could walk through all these again, but I also don't want to waste folks' time because I think I actually did, yeah. Anyway, so there's 510 is what we have. And feel free to reach out with any questions, but happy to discuss or answer any questions this afternoon.
Any questions for Ryan? Clarifications on any of the components?
I would think at some point, this value seems to be increasing rapidly. And
Yeah.
at some point, we ought to look at the formula again, see if it's really appropriate.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing is as farm consolidation takes place, people are paying higher and higher rates for rent just so they have enough feed for their animals, enough acres for the manure spreading and that kind of stuff. So it does make that land valuable, whereas these consolidated farms want to get more land, but somebody else at 300 cows, 200 cows, it's not an appropriate number, I guess I would say.
Yeah. Thank you.
The average rental is the available space to rent staying the same while the rental rate goes up, or are we losing available land to be rented? Just wondering if the rental rate is being applied on fewer acres.
The rental, these are very, very great points to this discussion. The rental rates are used because it's the best annual data we have about those rental costs. Many other states use profit or income off of the land, which is a much different calculus than how this is represented. The agency's involvement with this survey, there are a lot of informal arrangements in agriculture in Vermont, a lot of handshake deals, a lot of historic deals. So this is a representation of what it costs to rent certain types of fields, but there's also a lot of rental costs that may not be reported in that survey and how it's collected and what they're asking about. So it's the best data we have for and it satisfy the rental value approach. But again, we're a very small state. Many other states have land grant universities with much bigger budgets and are doing surveys themselves, so we can have much better and more granular data about farm income, farm costs. The only other option is the ag census, which is every 5 years, and that's much more static, but much less responsive to the annual changes. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but just saying, yeah, it's a discussion area about this equation. In some ways, it's the best we can do, but we could also brainstorm and see if there's other data sets or other ways to calculate what the because as we've seen from ag data I've shared with this board in other meetings, farming is having a really tough time. And so this rental, like it's tough to make money sometimes off of farming and acreage. And so it's not always reflective of the health of the ag economy in as far as how much money can be made from the land on a particular year. So it is not really responsive to that kind of perspective if you use that rental survey data.
I think Ted had a good point. Part of the rental rate has to do with nutrient management plans. You know, you need so many acres to stay complicit with the environmental regulations, you know, so if there's land near the farm, it's more valuable than some that are 5 miles away. Just logistics, part of it. If you backed up prior to this, we used to do it off income on the dairy from sales of milk. That was very erratic, and a lot of times we ended up negative. So this is a more consistent way than that was, but and I'm fine with the consistency, but as you can see, we're up, 25% in 5 years on our tax rate, which is, not totally picturesque of what's going on the income off the land.
And barring a major adjustment in the economy, which often is just a temporary dip, right? Inflationary pressures, it's going to be a linear increase in that ag land value. And as that value goes up, right, the tax benefit decreases. So it is going to be a decreasing tax benefit. Obviously, there's so many other factors in that, but if you just held those constant and looked at the ag land value, it just keeps going up.
Yeah.
With this.
Sure. And then Steve, so Michael and then Steve.
Yeah, this might be an amateur question, but are the rental agreements structured the same usually? I mean, are they based on flat rate or production or anything like that? You see a trend?
They're all very different.
Okay.
A lot of our neighborhood.
A lot of them are handwritten and.
Okay, yeah, it might be in units of maple syrup as opposed to.
Okay. All consistency.
Got it.
All over the place.
Steve, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a concern of mine just looking back, and I haven't been doing this very long, 12 or 13 years, and I think the ag rate has more than doubled. The forest land rate, that's going up. There was a significant bump, I think around 2021, 2022. But yeah, no, I think it's worth a look or worth some critical thinking. What are other states doing? Are there other ways that we could calculate the ag rate? And I guess the number doesn't matter so much as, tax rates and assessed values, sorry, my voice, I'm like getting over the flu, but a lot of agricultural land in Benson is still assessed at $600 an acre. So it's insane. And I think a lot of towns are on wait lists to be reappraised. And I think, right, say the assessed value of properties doubles. I mean, the tax rate obviously will decrease, right, to whatever, cover the expenses of the town. But yeah, it's an issue. I mean, the rates in the towns that I usually work in, Addison, Rutland, Northern Bennington County, it's not staying even close to proportionate to the increases of assessed value to the increase in the rates. In towns that have been doing reappraisals, a lot of them aren't adjusting the per acre value of that excess acreage. They're jacking up the value of the houses, the 2 acre building lot, improvements, buildings, but that $1,000 or a couple $1,000 per acre of the excess acreage is staying the same. So it's cutting into everybody's benefit from current use disproportionately.
The figures I have in my spreadsheet, 2005, the ag use value was $122, and now it's $510. So over a 20-year time frame, it's a lot more than just a doubling.
Yeah, and I only know from like 2012 or 13 is when I started looking at it.
Yeah, and I'm just sharing real quick the In our PBR annual report, we've got it back to 2012 and there's lots of good longitudinal data in this report, right? And I was showing a few minutes ago the acreage, the ag acreage has been starkly not changing, going down a titch, but there's only so much ag acreage. But yeah, so
One thing we've talked about other years is the formula. And I know, we can't here, it has to be legislatively done, I think, but that 2% risk rate has been the same since I've been here, which is longer now, I think about since the 90s. And 2% has been the same. Is the rest the same on land now? And what you evaluate that number different. That could have a big change on the end number.
well, and just to be clear, so the current use advisory board can certainly make a recommendation for a different calculation and ask that of the legislature. Like, I do think that's actually one of the statutory expectations of this board. If they need to change, it would require a statutory change, but if that is something the board feels really strongly is not serving the purpose, then I think the next step would be whatever that new formula would be. Obviously, we'd have to have it modeled by the joint fiscal office to see.
Yes, I know you're right. I think we have to be careful what we go over there with.
Yes.
May not
Don't want to make it worse.
May not come back with what your goal is, right?
It'd be interesting to approach them and ask for resources and some study. Like this group isn't in a position to do the analysis and pull together everything with the rigor that we'd want to propose something. But if this committee could guide the development and evaluation of some options with a consultant, that might be, without a commitment to an outcome, there might be some interest and buy-in for something like that. But I'd be really intimidated if this group were to pursue a rule change on the use value independently. And the buzzsaw that we'd walk into when we submitted that, and even the economic analysis that would be necessary, even at the beginning of those rule submissions, we wouldn't be prepared to.
Economic impact statement, right? Like, so I think you're absolutely spot on as far as if folks want to look at this, resources to do the research and study are needed, because this is a big program, that ag program. We don't have the capacity, resources, or expertise to get into the level of analysis, and every state has something, every state does it different. And so it's for agriculture. So it's like, it'd be a pretty significant body of work to do a survey and understand how this is applied, and then come up with proposals for Vermont, and then try to understand the impact to coffers of the state and landowners. Yeah, it's a big, I think it would be a really big undertaking, but as folks are talking about it, seems to be some issues rising to the top where.
Elizabeth, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that original, the calculation that we're using now, or that you all are using now, to use the correct pronouns, that was developed by the Agency of Ag. At that point in time, they had an ag economist on staff who developed that formula. She was riffed in like the riffs back in the early 90s, I think. So they've lost that resource, which is, and I've tried to do the research to, when this has come up in the past, to see sort of how it got developed and what was the thinking, other than switching from milk prices to rental values, which is what led to that session law change, because the legislature didn't like the board simply changing the formula and decided it needed to go through rulemaking so that it got appropriate public input. So that's just a little bit of the history, since I know a lot of the board members haven't been around. Harold probably remembers. I should have asked Harold how it happened.
Yeah, well, I think you summed it up as well as I could. It was,
All right, thanks.
Yeah, just curious, like, do we know what the proportion of of agricultural land that's leased versus owned by farmer operators is roughly?
That I got asked that by the legislature as well. I think we can to some extent, but our data is, I don't know that we have that parsed out concrete. Yeah, Elizabeth, go ahead.
I think you can get that from at least the application information if it's leased land, but that would only be if it's less than 25 acres. Do we keep track of whether or not it's leased? So if it's over 25 acres and leased, we'd have no idea. So it definitely would underestimate the number.
Yeah, and I'm just curious, not even necessarily just current use land, but you know, how much ag land is leased versus owned, you know, in Vermont.
If the Agency of Ag doesn't know, no one knows.
Ryan knows, right?
I'm not willing to say anything off the top of my head right now. I got to do some looking into this question, but it certainly wouldn't be related to current use figures. It would be only survey data from USDA. And it might be there.
Yeah, Keith.
It sounds like we may be so comfortable with the ag value that we've gone on to other topics.
I don't know. I thought we were.
Shall we make a motion?
Yes, but I did want to just clear up. This sort of question will add up, and it sounds like the consensus of this board is that if we are pressed by any and all, or if we think it is appropriate, that the next step would be we would need funding for consultant and or joint discipline. Like we would need some significant research. We're not opposed to that idea of looking at that, but that would be our response if asked. Is that fair? Okay.
And I think that would be a good response if anybody proposed a change. If we were to pursue one, that's would be a prerequisite to pursuing it ourselves. But if somebody were to propose that, I think we would say first things first.
Yeah.
We need somebody to evaluate this.
Thank you. All right, yeah. Do we have a motion to approve? Is it 510 for the 2025 agriculture use value?
The proposed 2025 agricultural use value from this calculation method is $510. Welcome.
I'll make that motion, Mike.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Do we have a second? Second by Harold. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. So we have approved the 2025 use value for agriculture land. We've got a few places we've got to update that, obviously, like in our software and on our website and our annual report. And then Joint Fiscal Office asked me to update them that as well. So we'll get that word out this week.
Yeah. Landowners.
Oh yeah, landowners probably wanted to too. All right, we'll move on to the forest and the forest greater than a mile categories from FPR.
Did print out the spreadsheet for supporting the paper products industry.
You must have a fancy printer. Look how big that paper is.
You know, I tried to just do legal, but we only had the 11 by 17.
Do you want me to read it?
My pleasure. Thanks, Ron.
Okay.
She have all mine.
No, I have.
All right. So I have just a couple of slides that kind of walk through what is also on the spreadsheet printout. Please feel free to interrupt me and ask questions. I've been living this calculation pretty intensively for a couple of days, and it's easy to forget that that's not your experience this past week as well. So
Yes.
to start, just kind of a review of the equation itself. It's a very similar approach to what ag does. And then just to review some of the variables and the years associated with the variables, because it can become a little bit confusing. So the harvest stumpage value is the total of the 10-year average of our harvest volumes multiplied by the average stumpage value by species. The harvest volumes are 2023 data. And the stumpage values are from the previous 4 quarters. So that'd be Q4 of 23 and the first 3 quarters of 24. So we multiply those two together. So the unharvested stumpage value is our ratio of net growth to removals, and this is Forest Service data. This number is from the 2022 published inventory. And what that ratio tells us is it's just the unit remaining on that we're growing on the landscape to each individual unit of removals on the landscape. So for 2022, that's a 2.85, which is just the smallest, tiniest decrease from last year. Forested acres, also from the 2022 Forest Service inventory. We have a management factor, which is a constant at 25%, and that just represents the costs for management to landowner, planning, consultancy fees, and road maintenance, that type of thing. The discount rate is a 10-year average of the 30-year Treasury securities. And then the effective tax rate from Department of Taxes. So next, I've just got a couple of slides just showing trends over time. So this is our total harvest value. There is an increase-ish for the 2023 harvest year, and it's entirely a function of increased stumpage values. Our actual harvest volumes have continued to decline, but we had a pretty big increase in our stumpage pricing. And then just looking at forest land acres and our growth through removals. And just a caution, I realized that forest land acres could look pretty dramatic looking at that line. It's a very narrow scale. Yeah, so when you look at it at like a full scale, it's actually a pretty steady line over that time. It's just really exaggerated in this slide. And then our growth through removals, like I said, it's just a very minor decrease in that 2022 inventory. And then we've got our discount rate and then the effective tax rate. It is as they appear. Yeah, not sure what else to say there. So then looking at the actual numbers, so you can see that harvest stumpage value increase. So what we do is we multiply that stumpage value by the unharvested stumpage value, and that lets us estimate the value that is remaining on the land that could be available for landowners if they were to harvest it. And then we do a per acre divided by forested acres. When it's multiplied by the management factor, subtracted, it gives you that net income per acre. And then capitalized gives us our calculated use value. We then average that with the previous 4 years of the set current use value. So this year, the forest land use value, the 5-year average is $203.26. And then for forest land that is further than a mile from which class road?
Class 1, 2, and 3 roads.
Class 1, 2, and 3 roads is $152.44. And that's just 75% of the full value. I went through that pretty fast. So.
Any questions or clarifications? Elizabeth.
I think the use value needs to be in a whole number and not decimal points.
Oh, apologies.
Yeah, that's okay. It'll just screw up the computer system.
So I'll just round to the nearest whole dollar. So that'd be $203 for the use value, for the forest land use value, and then $152 for greater than a mile. Eventually I will remember to do that.
So just for comparison for folks who want to present over the forest land per acre in 2024 was 188. Forest land greater than a mile was 141.
And it's up there and then subsequent columns. Got it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Alan?
Yes, I will just, sorry to be a broken record on this, but I make this comment every year. And I understand the environment currently in the State House and bringing changes to the program to the legislatures is always a risky business. But the management factor, I think, has been the same since the inception of the program. And just making the point that management costs have dramatically increased for landowners across the state. Certainly fees they're paying to consulting foresters, costs associated with road maintenance and management, costs associated with building landings and skid trails, compliance with acceptable management practices, the concerns for invasive plant species that have grown over the last decade or possibly more, and responsibilities of landowners to tend to that, as well as the onslaught of exotic pests and loss of timber value and cost of managing that threat and risk to their land. So I know Keith has done some digging to try to find out what types of costs were actually considered when that factor was developed. But I think should we address the agricultural use value, it would also be appropriate to certainly look at that one factor in this calculation, because I think that should be higher.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just agree. I'd say both calculations, both rates are up 25% in 5 years. So, both, neither are sustainable if you're talking about income off the land. And that 25, the management factor has been the same since I've been here.
I'm sorry if this is repeating, but the management factor, how is that? What does that reflect?
Well, Alan had a good description of it, but yeah, so the management factor just accounts for that cost of the landowner to have that forest land and manage it as forest land. So hiring a consultant forester, doing your management planning, putting in roads to harvest, putting in landings, maintaining your road infrastructure, complying with AMPs.
So that is the why it's there.
Right.
And then why is it 25%?
Right.
Because it's always been.
Yeah.
Okay. So each year you don't have to do any.
It's a constant, yeah, it's just always there.
Exactly.
And it says here that was for season 2005, so that's the same percentage since 2005 for the same factor.
It's been the same factor since, and I don't know. In fact, I don't think that the management factor always existed, but since it existed, it's been 25%.
Just looking through the original language to see what it's. Any other questions or comments or clarifications? Do we have a motion to accept the 2025 use values for forest at 203 and forest greater than a mile of 152?
This is Alan, so moved.
Alan, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. All right, so we've approved those use values. Excellent, thank you. All right, we are making good progress on our agenda, but I think that was a really good discussion and some good points we should have at the ready about the calculations and that we need to get this board together. And we get asked about that. We need some help. Okay, so next up, we wanted to just provide an update on the administrative rules, which have come out a few times. Hopefully everyone got those in advance of the meeting. And if you didn't, they're now on our website as part of the materials for this meeting. So if you just search Current Use Advisory Board on the tax.vermont.gov website, that's how I find your page. So just for background, for a couple of years, there's been a subcommittee of the board that has been assigned to review and clean up the administrative rules. I believe they have not been updated since 1985. And the aim of administrative rules is to clarify and specify pieces that are assigned under statute that may not be the right grain size for statute, but they are administrative rules that follow a rulemaking process. They get approved by, as Will was articulating, right, it has a very formal process laid out by the Secretary of State's office, including legislative committee. So it seemed like it was high time that we spend the time updating those rules. So that subcommittee has continued to meet. We met pretty recently, not that long ago, one last time, so that we could at least give you folks that update and show you all where we're at. I think the question on the table is kind of next steps as far as, do we want to walk through some today in the next 44 minutes? Do folks want to take it back with you and digest and then send comments? So the idea being that we would get the subcommittee back together based on what the board asks, and any of board members can come to those meetings as well, obviously. The different agencies would take them to their commissioners and attorneys and make sure that they're all copacetic there. And once we feel like we have a rule that this board wants to advance, then this board would vote to initiate that process and we go through the process that Will has outlined. It does have requirements for public comment period. We would have to post notices. We'd have to post comment. When I've done this in the past at AOE, we also had a way for folks to submit comments on our website so that we could collect a lot. Folks don't have to come to a meeting to provide their comment. If we think the volume is that high. So does anybody else who's on that subcommittee, Suzanne or Keith or Steve, have anything else just to set the table that I missed? Okay.
I don't have anything to add, Jill. I just reiterate, you said at the beginning, the major goal for this round of the rules was just to bring the rule up to current statute and existing practice, and then anticipating another round of revisions to dig into policy changes. Hoping that would enable this rule to go through quicker, to get it up to current standards, and then dig in deeper and fight the battles for policy issues the second round.
All right.
So for example, in the new rule where there's new specific description of the size of pond and the type of pond that's eligible for enrollment in the program, that's clearly not in the 1985 rule. That is, however, an existing procedure at the tax department, the current use program. And so you're taking your existing policy or procedure and you're codifying it in the rule.
Right, and I believe in this case, there was a hearing officer decision that.
Actually, for ponds, that was a misuse for years. So it's been existing practice for many years.
Yeah. And when you put, so this is not, I'm not harping on ponds. I'm just talking about like this product. That was just an example. Sorry.
If you did, you wouldn't be the only one.
Okay. All right. My only question was, what surface water in the state is not considered a public water? That's just the environment side of me. But the question that I have related to this is the flexibility you have through the administrative process of procedure and policy documents versus APA rulemaking. Like, is there like something like, say pond, sorry, something like pond. So like, if it needs to change, you got to go through rulemaking to change something. Like, is that something that's better held in the more flexible editing space of executive procedure versus, procedure and policy versus rulemaking? So that's just a question I'm asking about, like, because let's say you're like, I don't know, I'll have to read I have to read it with much more detail to kind of ask about that, but the stuff that you never ever want to change, like this is the core rule, like put that in the rule, and then the stuff that always changes or has changed, like keeping that out could be more helpful because then you don't have to go through this whole 9-month process to change something. So I don't know how much
That's a great
you guys have looked through that lens at this rule.
It's interesting. I think that because of the existence of the commissioner's minimum management standards, there are a lot of elements of forest land that have been punted to the procedures for that flexibility. I think for the lack of an equivalent procedure or outline of approach besides what was deer misuse for agricultural land and some other aspects of the program, this was perceived as the home to articulate that approach, like how we implement this. And a lot of it was affixed to the kind of more down home deer misuse stuff that attempted to outline what those procedures were, but there could be alternatives to deer misuse besides the rule.
And just for newer board members, or if anyone watches the recording, misuse was basically like a methodology for the two agencies to communicate specific like Q&A information, or?
It was kind of an FAQ that got baked into the back of the FPR's use value appraisal manual that was very down home. Somebody writes a question about ponds and then they've got a funny name related to ponds somehow, and then there's a response that kind of in prose and kind of layperson approach outlines here's what would be eligible and here's what would.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, the deer misuse was also published on its own by PVR. Deb Brighton originally wrote it. Some of you know Deb from her work at Joint Fiscal, but she used to run the current use program at the tax department before she became an independent economist, I think is what she is now. And so I think she started to write that once the rules stopped being revised every single year in order to provide some program and policy guidance. So that's sort of a little bit of backstory of why it got to be that way.
Thank you. That's a really good question too, because we really don't want to have to reopen this. And there were pieces that something that comes to mind, right, is there's mapping standards. And so over the years, we've gone back and forth. Are they better in the rule? Or are they better on their own? We've landed on they're better on their own because we want to have the flexibility to revise them as things change. So yeah, if we think we're hemming ourselves into something, we don't want to put anything in here that we don't feel like is not, bendable or concrete and wants to be in there indefinitely. But I also know, right, that like when we're making denials and having hearing officer decisions or court decisions, we want to have something concrete to make our decision on. So it's a tough.
Yeah, just my opinion on the short time I've been here. I mean, these rules don't describe the procedure for every scenario that we run into, but they kind of give us prescription for the more trending scenarios that we see so that we kind of have a standard answer for people because the magnitude of appeals and applications we have, we want to keep the standards, equal, fair among all applicants and enrollees.
Wherever you're not prescribed by law to write something in the rule a particular way, and it is something that changes often, standards shall be written to the specifications of the secretary or the commissioner of whatever, and then gives the rule says you must follow this, and then directs the agency to do the work in a more flexible manner. So but it is also for those that are really contentious, and you just either have to, I think, just be okay with we're going to update the rule all the time. If it is something that has to be a rule for that sort of rigor, but also I don't know. stop.
No, it's really, Ted, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, in our discussion, Keith, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we had a discussion of what is gross income, annual gross income, and if like a farmer has a woodlot that he harvests once every 10 years or so, it bumps his income, could throw him out. Did we ever come to a conclusion on that?
No.
And during our discussion, we discussed how the statute, that is one that we're hemmed in by statute. We need to look at the annual gross income. You know, so unless there's a statutory change allowing the board or PBR to look at more than 1 year, the statute currently says the annual gross income. So, you know, some things you can't go beyond statute in the rule. That's really the backstop there.
But I guess that if we're going to go to the legislature, that is an issue we need to come to conclusion on so we can discuss it and get it changed.
There was a fair amount of discussion in that committee. I'm sure it'll keep coming up about the 50% from the business of farming and things like that, because so many folks have either multiple jobs to support their practice, or they have a spouse or something like that that is also working. And so that income qualification is bubbles up now and then.
It's gross income, right?
Gross.
Not just.
Right.
Well, it's intended to keep the hobby farmers out of the program, I assume, but it's got to be a fair way to make it happen.
Well, I think that just to comment, this would be, obviously it's legislative, right? So not rulemaking. So, but just this topic has come up, and I just think it's very interesting that demographics of farmers and the amount of income they get from farming distributed between all farmers between when this program was stood up and today. And there's a lot of farmers, but very few of them are, you know, full-time farmers. And so this question of like ag land, 25 acres or less, and the lease has to be a farmer, right? But in many of these small towns, the person has a outside job that the spouse does have a job off the farm, or it's just something they do part-time. But like the land's being harvested, you know, it's being fed to animals. Like if the land's being farmed, it's just that specific definition of farmer that would qualify to be the lessor of that land. I feel like that's maybe something that shifted over time, as there's not as many people who are able to farm full-time that have been consistently cutting hay in Vermont for many decades. And so I think that attrition is contributing maybe to some of the friction that's coming up in the turnover of properties that may be happening and re-enrollment that's happening. So it's not maybe what was said, but just calling out some analysis we did within the census for farmers and the share of the amount of income they earn that could possibly be enough to have that be part, like enough of a gross income that it's meaningful, or you could actually perhaps live off of it. There's many fewer that are doing that, that have that income today as compared to as a proportion of farms than in the past. So anyway, just some demographic changes. The rules haven't updated, and I don't think the law's been updated on that part in a while, is leading to just some of the challenges that are happening there.
All right, so do folks want to review these on your own? And I'm thinking of like Ryan and Keith. Do we want to bring them to our, commissioner, secretary, legal counsels next, and then bring any comments back to the subcommittee? Okay.
If we have time for that, we could do it expedited. But I need some more eyes on it than just me to make sure it's.
What would be a reasonable time to say, ask for that feedback and then any other feedback from you all? to get that subcommittee back together. So it's February 12th. April 1?
Yes.
Yes. Is that too? Should I have more? I say March 12th?
Say April 1. I think if we were to set it up, get meetings, people have 2 weeks or so to review, get ideas, propose changes.
Summarize it all there.
Okay.
You want to say like a month from now, but there's always so much.
I know.
I was
And this
jumping
is
at
a
March
short month,
15th.
so-
Let's being honest and realistic. April 1 might be pushing,
It's a
but
short month.
let's commit because this is important.
Town meeting day, but yes, let's commit. So after this, I'll send the note to all of you, make sure the links are all there. You've got exactly what you need. There's the clean version and the marked up version. And ask for feedback no later than April 1. So that then that subcommittee can compile those and then theoretically bring them back to the board again. So we might have a special board meeting this spring, right? Because rulemaking and all this, like, it's good. We've got to, as a board, review it and approve it together to keep it rolling. Sound like a plan?
Sounds great indeed.
Yes.
And you're telling me I'm wrong, so I think keep going on that. All right, great, thank you. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about the rulemaking. They required us to have it. Can they refile again and ask us to do that again?
Oh, the person who requested it.
Yeah, anyone can do it at any time.
Anytime. So how often do we have to respond to that? So.
But unfortunately, you have to respond within 30 days.
So if somebody could say, hey, they're not happy with what we came up with, and they can refile and say.
Yeah, I would say that once you get into the rulemaking process, the most effective thing to do is file an official comment on the draft rule, rather than going through that request for rulemaking process. So that I think I would anticipate that that's how members of the public would interact with the board and comment on the rules in the official comment period after it gets going. But yeah, there's no restriction on how often someone can ask for that request for rulemaking.
If a request for ruling is received again, does it require an in-person meeting by the board to respond?
I think it does. It was just a coincidence, fortunate coincidence that you were meeting today. Otherwise, I was thinking that we would probably need to call a special meeting, and it could just be online and quick.
Okay, that's good to know.
Mm-hmm. You can see it coming up. This one.
Keep coming.
Jill, I had a question for Keith on the, I think you said Act 59 on the conserved land that's in the program. Is there an actual bill over there that is kind of headed in this direction by rapid current use land into totally conserved land, or what?
That would result in use value appraisal being permanently conserved? I do not see it heading that way. No, I think it's more about evaluating conserved land, inclusive of properties with easements, as well as use value appraisal land, and looking at them together. I don't believe that it's suggesting anything about land enrolled as use value should be permanent. There have been other discussions about ways that people could voluntarily pursue that, but I haven't seen any bills land there.
Yeah, it's within the law, the definition of conserved, right, is that permanently protected. And so 2030 is pretty well locked into that. I don't know I haven't really read what Higley's, Representative Higley's bill does to propose how to change that. But they expand what could qualify as being considered conserved for 2050. And so I agree. I don't think there's anything to change anything with the current use program. There's a viewpoint within this process, the Vermont Conservation Strategy Initiative, that we need more tools to recognize tools for, that conservation have these benefits. And so I think that may be one of the reasons why that proposal is coming up, because right now you can't count the current use land.
No.
But
any of those objectives are an erosion of landowner rights. So it's, at the end of the day, it's gotta be voluntary.
Yeah. It's all a plan. It's a goal, right? All of this is voluntary. Was baked in there anyways. But the durability of it is what the Act 59 2023 really required for that 2030 goal.
Where does the interest to include land enrolled in current use along with conservation land in these bills come from? Would it meet the 30 for 30 or 50 for 50 goals? Is that why this has been viewed as potentially looping it all together?
I think that's the idea, right? So count it.
I haven't talked, I've actually been curious. I don't fully understand.
I mean, it would meet them immediately, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Gail, go ahead. You're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. I think I got an email as the clerk from somebody that was very upset that they were being told that they had to sign something that gave current use people permission to enter their property at any time without notice. And I didn't see that in the rules, so I didn't know where that was coming from.
It's in statute.
Particular statute that I could refer them to?
And I think that's for like adverse inspection kind of stuff.
That is for inspections of enrolled forest land.
Yeah.
Is ag land included in that?
Most always notify us.
Right. You don't need to.
Yeah, I do have the site for that. That's Title 32, Section 3755, C2.
Hold on. C2. Yep.
Great, thank you. I'll pass that on.
Thanks, Suzanne. Yeah, and that came up in the horse council testimony last week. I had to correct them. They said on the record when they were testifying to committee that current use staff were going out and physically inspecting horse barns and then kicking them out of the program. And the current use staff does not do their work outside of this building. We don't have any capacity, resource, or to go do inspections, and we're surely not targeting any particular. So upon further, inquiry about where that came from, and I did correct it on the record with the committee, with the speaker, they were actually referring to the current use audits that PVR does, and that's actually an audit of the listing and assessing practices using property record cards and things like that. It's still not a physical inspection of any property, but those things get out in the ether and then take on a life of their own. But yeah, in that particular case, my understanding is it's specific to the forest management.
And Jill, I should know, it's also on the current use application. I'm not sure what year that was added, but to enroll in the program, you need to sign the application. It does provide authority for folks to enter the property to ensure that the land is being used consistent with the program. So that is something to enroll in the program you need to agree to on the application.
And if it's on the application, I assume that must mean that we verified we do have that. That right?
Well,
Are you
in
sure
order
it's
to
on the
administer.
application?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay, I've never noticed on the application.
Yeah, it was added a few years ago. In order to administer the program, folks have to be able to go in and ensure that the land is being properly used in the eligibility that they applied for.
It's on the paper, C301. It is on it. Yep.
Thanks,
So
Carrie. Carrie just stuck it in there too. Sorry, go
does
ahead,
that
Gail.
does that require any advance notice, or you can just show up? I mean, as a lister, we try to make an appointment to go to somebody's place and do an inspection. We just don't show up. So I just don't know where this guy was coming from that was complaining, but I want to be able to give him a good answer.
Yeah, the county foresters often will let folks know that they're conducting an inspection and will let landowners know that they'd be welcome to join them. We do not always secure permission prior to visiting the property. We have to, well, statute mandates we were to inspect a property once every 10 years. That means nearly 1,700 inspections a year. We cannot do that with the time it would take to secure permission and coordinate a visit every time. So while we do notify landowners, there are times when we're on a property, we're right next door to another property that's already enrolled, and it makes sense to visit that property and confirm compliance with the program. We have spoken to this individual already, and
Oh, you know who I'm talking about then, huh?
absolutely.
Sorry.
So,
Thank you.
yep. And Gail, this is not a landowner from Tinmouth.
Right, I know that.
Yeah, this is something to consider. Everybody throughout the state received communication on this.
Right. Oh, I gathered that this was the second one that he sent out. He sent another one before. Actually, this is probably the third one, so.
Okay.
He's on a tear.
He's thorough.
All right. Any last minute additions to the agenda or anything? Anything we didn't cover, folks want to make sure we mention? Housekeeping, definitely please don't forget to submit your per diem paperwork to Kate so we can reimburse you for your time and mileage for those of you who came here.
I'll send out a copy of that form after this meeting.
Thank you, Kate. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second by Gail. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yours if you want.
No.
All right, we're
Have
done.
plenty of
Thanks everybody very much.
Thank you.
I think so.